Hello, everybody. Greetings again. So welcome to the session number 4 of immigration brought to you by Let Us Talk It and IMLAS. So this is Srini Tonta from Detroit. Let Us Talk It is all about creating an informed and empowered community. And we have, webinars, Tuesday to Friday every day, like on professional and technology and life. And on Fridays, webinar is about, and then of course we do special sessions like these, immigration and others. And thank you, Rajguru and team. So in today's session, I think a few things to remember. This is to start with, this is not an interactive session. In the first phase of this session, we'll be answering all the questions that you submitted through the help page, letustalkit.com/help, where you have to choose the category, immigration 485 filing questions. So this session is specifically addressed for, that category only. So we'll only consider the questions which are falling under the 485 filing. So Rajguru is going to, so Hari is going to, read out the questions briefly, and then Rajguru is going to answer. And after Rajguru's session is over, probably in the next 30 minutes, then probably we'll continue for a little longer, where Hari would be trying to answer some of the other questions that were submitted from the help page. So yeah, thank you again, everybody. And if any of you want to volunteer to help for the community, to give your best in terms of the skills or volunteering time, yeah, please feel free to let us know. So Rajguru and Hari, over to you.
Yes, is Hari there?
Sure. Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so we can get started. We only have 6 questions being submitted under the 485 filing. So if time permits, we can take, there's other people who submitted in the other section too. So before I start off with questions, Rajguru sir, do you have any opening comments or anything to make before I get into the questions?
Not much today. So today's our main call is only to answer any quick questions, during the filing process. So only thing I noticed it, the forms is not very simple forms. It's too many pages there, too many data they need. So so everybody's still working on. So maybe some of them they already filed it, but whatever only the first beginning sets, we are starting moving on. They mainly, there is a question on jobs outside US, the last jobs, those columns and all in questionnaire, a lot of people not giving properly. And another thing, the residents, they have lived before coming to United States for more than 1 year, or so after coming here also, if they stayed outside the US for more than 1 year, they have to report it. So those questions are also everybody missing it. So calling the employees back and collecting the data and filling out, it's taking, it's almost time consuming. So even our estimate, we can complete a case in 30 minutes kind of, now it's taking almost 2-3 hours. So everybody is stressed out working on. So during this time, anything quickly, we can answer it, we can move on any farm related questions or any document related question, just on the filing 485. So you can move on with questions so that we can see how we can quickly address it.
Sure. So the first question is on visa denial. So they're saying that the L1A extension was denied, and on the same day of denial, they got an L1 to H1B change of status approved. So they're asking, do we have to basically at the section, have you been denied a visa? Should we mark it yes or no? And if we mark it yes, where would we give an explanation that
that question
L1
itself, it's a little different. They are not asking about a status denial in US. They are talking about any visa denied. So that full question is either visa denied or one more, or the question also there. So visa denial, so anywhere if you went to consulate and if your visa denied, report it. L1 denial in the USCIS, you don't need to report there.
Yes. All right. So the next question is, there's multiple places wherein we are putting in the 140 information. Does the principal applicant's 140 apply to dependents too? For example, the I-944 under part 4, should we select yes or no for do you have an approved 140 as an alien worker?
Yeah, actually,
this
is a 944 form. It's for self-sufficiency. They are just looking at the question is whether that particular applicant declarant. So in 944, they are calling them as a declarants, whether that declarant has I-140 or not. When it comes to principal applicant, they have their own, they have their I-140 in their name. So they can say that yes, put the number, then they can skip to that next part, whatever. But when it comes to derivative applicants, if they have separate I-140 approved, they can put that number and skip those educational questions and all. Otherwise, they have to say no, because there is no I-140 on their name. So they can move on by providing all the educational details.
Sure, thank you. The next question is, do we need to provide the Indian address and Indian employment details even if we are in US for more than a decade?
Yes, they must give Indian address and also that last employment in outside US, because why they are asking, this is all for biometric, I mean background verification, if any they have to do. So they want to see that last residence, if you lived 1 year in a foreign country, probably some cases they can come back and ask for police certificate, all those things, so any clearance, those things and all. We must provide that one address. They lived outside United States for more than 1 year, whatever the time, so they lived more than one time, 1 year. The latest one, they have to provide it. Let's say they came here in 2000. So the 1999, wherever they lived, they have to provide that address. And last employment, whether it is 3 months or 10 months or 1 year, whatever, last employment abroad also they have to provide. So even in my office, whatever we are getting questionnaires, almost except one person, none of them they completed that questionnaire. So we have to go back, and also their expectation also they need form immediately. So I completed, can you send the form? But we are running through all those issues. So now we have to go back and call them, but make sure to complete whatever the data available. Just complete everything. Many of the attorneys using INS Zoom form, it's not very clear on those. They all just the questions also several tabs. They have problem completing many times. It's messing up with the names also, a relationship. So there are a lot of challenge there in the law office side also to fix those things and timely provide services too. So make sure whatever the data available with you, at least supply to them. But this employment, last employment abroad and the last residence in abroad for more than 1 year, it is must.
All right. The next question is on I-94. They're saying page 2, question 23A, recent immigration history. Should we provide the I-94 details provided at the port of entry or the latest I-94? Last entered to US in 2018 on L2. Husband recently switched to fresh H1B this October and H4 just filed and don't have a new I-94. It's the same person who asked the first question wherein L1 got denied and they just recently got L1 to H1B approved.
Correct, yeah. So they have to provide that. First you are asking about I-94, which one they have to provide. So normally once you enter, you are going to have an I-94, and whenever you are extending whatever, you are going to extending, you are extending the same I-94 number. So normally it is not going to be different number unless they put, by mistake, they put the old I-94s, whatever. But for this question, the fill out whatever the I-94 number you entered in, and also make sure that the same number you have in extension, When it comes to expiry date, if they already extended that I-94 number, put that extended date. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. The next one is they're saying there's a typo in place of birth field listed on the passport. It's different from the one listed on the birth certificate. Will this mistake impact the I-485 process and lead to further RFPs? If yes, then can we submit I-485 application as is now and later do the correction in the passport?
Yes, that's what they have to do. So because if a passport and date of birth, whatever the birth certificate is not matching, there is a possible of RFPs. So that time they have to explain what happened, whatever. But at this time, if they born in the place where it is listed in the passport, they have to go there to get non-availability certificate or whatever. Otherwise, they have to correct the passport if a birth certificate says one place. So correcting birth certificate probably it's not a good idea, or also it is not an a right thing to do, because birth certificate probably birth they have registered at the time of birth. Maybe they did mistake in passport, so they can correct the passport. So this is all very individual question. They have to talk to attorneys, or they have to think where to correct, how to proceed further.
All right. The next question is on marriage certificate. They're saying that the marriage certificate has a delayed registration of 2 years and 10 months. Since it's more than a 1-year window, do I need to submit notarized affidavits by third party? If notary is required, can a local affidavit through my friend be used, or need to come with parents from India?
No, actually, it can be issued by friends also who were attended the marriage, so they have knowledge about the marriage and all. So it can be given by anybody who attended the marriage, or they aware of the marriage.
All right. The next one is, do I need to declare foreign assets like house, agriculture land? If so, is there any guidance about property value?
So actually, if you want to list assets, you can list that also, because the 944 itself, it's whether to see that whether you have sufficiency to live here without burdening the government. So most of the time, your income from tax returns, your W-2s and all, that will take care of it. So you don't need to put all the assets from overseas and all. Whatever you have in US, you can put it. It's not tax return to disclose everything. So the assets in US, income in US, that would be sufficient for this purpose.
Okay. The next one is, do we need to provide all the credit card statements for all the cards that we owe?
You don't need to provide all these things, but wherever you are saying that there is a liability, just to prove that, you can give evidence. Even you can give the not complete statement, only that, what are the balance. So the first page of the seats kind of, you don't need to give complete credit card statements at all.
Okay. The next question is, my son just turned age 21 last month. My priority date is December 2012 under EB2 category. The 140 EB2 took around 5 months, receipt date to approval date. My employer is planning to do a concurrent filing for EB3 downgrade 140 and 485. Is my son eligible for applying adjustment of status currently?
Again, we were talking, because he said that current, but we don't know current based on the final action dates or based on the filing date. If it's based on the filing date, we are not going to take anything advantage of it. So whenever the final action date current for his date, that time he can deduct from the minor's, whatever that son's age. Let's say around 21 years and 6 months. If the date become current, then he can reduce that 6 months and see that whether he is still within 21 years or not.
Yeah,
So
currently they're only, because they said December 2012, It's not final action date. It's
Right,
still
yeah.
the
So that's
filing
right.
date.
So since it's not final action date, I would suggest make sure to continue on his status. Even if he's filing 485, he has to be on his own status. But if he file 485, probably if he's converting to F1, that time also we may have problem in changing status, H4 to F1, all those things. So this case again, let them discuss with attorney whether it will work or not. But in my opinion, so probably it's not going to work out for this for his son.
Okay. Looks like Srini just updated the sheet. Give me a second.
Yeah, you
Alright,
can
so then,
go ahead.
yeah. I was going to go to the other things, non this thing, but since you updated this one, just going to take, okay. So they are asking, the next question is, can anyone from Imilo can set up a call to fill all the generic information in all the forms in one go? So, basically you have to take an appointment. There would be a form, you have to fill it up. They're going to review. The form itself is going to take a lot of time. I don't think any attorney is going to spend so much time going one, because you have to go collect information. So it's not really fair asking an attorney to sit while you do that.
Yeah, actually, the cases we are handling it, even though it is taking time, we are trying to connect with the applicants. Then we are collecting data or whatever. It's a one go. Let's say, as a consulting, we cannot do that. So if you are working with our office already, so we are doing that already.
Oh, you are doing that. Okay.
Yeah, so we are doing means that we are providing questionnaire, they are completing it. Once they complete it, so when we are preparing, we are seeing that many things missing and we are making a note of it, which data we needed. Then we are calling them to complete, in the form itself. And then again, we are giving for a final review.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really time consuming with the data amount of data we have to enter.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm not taking any cases anymore if they want to file before 20th. So the next batch of the cases we are taking only if if they are agreeing to mail between 20th to 31st. Whatever the cases we accepted now, our goal is to file everything by 15th to 20th. From now to 20th, we are going to complete everything. And the next set, we can start working on the questionnaires or whatever. But the filing window will be between 20th to 31st.
Yeah. So the next question is, I have an EB3 priority date of 11/2010, and then ported the date to EB2 with the same date. EB3 perm 140 is still active, and I am with the same employer and the same job. Am I eligible to file under EB3, thinking I'll get the GC faster in EB3? If yes, do I have to use the 485J?
So he's talking about EB3 is from another employer, right?
No, same employer. Both are from same employer.
Well, same employer EB3, and they downgraded to EB2 with the same employer. If that is the case, he can even use that EB3 approval to file his 485. He no need to file once again for EB3 downgrade.
Yeah, so that he's saying if he uses the EB3, does he have to do the 485J?
Yes, if he is using EB3, there is no I-140 petition submitted along with 485. So 485J is must.
Yeah. So for I-944, what should we submit for property evaluation of our own house?
Yeah, they can give any estimate. Even some people, they are giving that Trulia, Zillow, what is that called? Those online website, or you can give
Zello?
taxes
Zello?
assessment paper from your city.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people just giving the free one from Zello.
Yeah.
In case someone kind of needs one right format, you can send out a request to put here or send it to Srini. We have a different service. We're not charging or doing anything, so don't go by it. But if you want, we can just pull out a report and send it to you. So the next question is, again, I think so we answered this a couple of times. What if EB2 moves forward? Can we still upgrade to EB2? How many days can I stay on H1B without using the EID while it's being approved? Can we travel with EIDs in progress as we are on H1 and H4 currently?
Yeah, if actually in this case, if you see, most of the people, they are downgrading to EB2, and later they want to go back to downgrading to EB3, and they want to go back to EB2. So in such cases and all, I would recommend to stay with the same employer on H1B status itself. H1B status, you are going to keep it in case something was to happen, you can switch back. And working with the same employer may help you to switch back to EB2 with the same approval. Even we are seeing the several people, they are going back to old employer, asking them, can you file it? So the same situation, if you want to upgrade to EB2 also, by the time if you go somewhere else and use your EAD, definitely these clients and all, they are not going to file immediately your perm application or another one and all. It's going to take time. So again, you want to come back to this employer. So that I would suggest at this time, if you file 485 and even if it costs 180 days, stay with the employer for longer. At least, definitely, you need them to upgrade to EB2 unless the new employer filing a perm and EB2 immediately.
Sure.
So you can still travel on H1B status and continue your I-485. And the same way, if you are traveling on parole, still you can continue on H1B status to extend and all. There are a couple of memos there, so you can go through. You can set those memos and look at it, read it. How to travel on H and L status while your adjustment of status pending. Whether you can still maintain your status or not. Even in one memo, they are giving this that your whatever the scenario situation. If I travel on parole, whether we can extend H1B. Those things and all in question answer format, it is there in that memo.
Okay. The next question is on, I don't have all the I-94s. Can you suggest how we could accommodate it?
I-94, you try to get it from your old petitions, if any extension petition, all those things. If it is not available, at least give that passport stamps, travel dates from the CBP site and all, and try to manage it. So as I mentioned last time, USCIS has all your records.
Okay. The next question is, if we have two different job titles, one on H1B and one on perm, which one should we put on 485?
Can you repeat once again?
If we have two different job titles, one on H1B and one on perm, which one do we put on I-485?
Yeah, so I-485, the question is two things different. When it comes to I-485J, they are talking about what is the permanent job offer that is from the perm. So if they are asking about last 5 years history, you have to provide based on your H1B job title, because that is the job you are working, you were working. So Job history, it is from H1B, and the future job on permanent employment, it is based on the perm application.
Okay. The next question is, what is the alien number for a dependent or spouse?
The alien number is not a required field. So if you are not clear, leave it blank. So if the derivative applicant, they don't have an alien number from their previous F1 status or H4 EAD status something, you can just ignore that field.
Okay. The next question is on applying two different 485s simultaneously. They're saying that the previous employer is willing to apply and currently they're working full time. So can they apply simultaneously both the 485s?
So already I explained there's two multiple 485 is not required, but if you still want to file two, you can go ahead file, but they are going to process everything together. That time it will lead lot of confusion. So I would suggest to file with one and interfile this I-140 approvals whenever required.
Sure. The only thing is in this particular thing, the old employer is already EB3 with a priority date of July 2014. The new employer is EB2 with July 2014. So new employer has to do a downgrade and 485, and the old one, they already have an EB3. So it's direct 485, but again, they have to do the schedule J of 485. So they're asking if they can do parallelly to take some advantage.
That's what in this case, since they have one approval with the priority current, they can file 485 with that. And once the second employer's I-140 downgrade is approved, they have another EB3 approval. So anytime they can interfile with the previous 485. So they no need to file another 485 along with that petition concurrently also. They can file I-140 EB3 downgrade petition separately, get it approved, and whenever they need, if it's useful, they can use that approval to interfile in the pending 485.
Okay. Yeah, so the next question kind of it's more from whatever rumor that if you use the EID, you cannot switch over and cannot use AC21. So I think so we answered it, but since it's in the category, I'll just ask.
Still, I don't understand and what context that attorney and also I heard that yesterday also in one call, another attorney also mentioned that yes, you cannot do it, whatever. I don't know on what basis they are claiming it. It can be done. So even if you use EAD, parole, whatever, based on whatever you got it, later you can interfile. I did many times.
Okay. The next one is if I-140 approved from previous employer, if filed EB3 downgrade using that employer and got EID, then when does the resource have to switch to the old employer and work for 6 months so that we will be eligible to do AC21 with the new employer?
So AC21, once you file I-485, after 180 days, you are eligible to do invoke AC21. So whether you went to the other employer or this employer, whatever, doesn't matter. If an employer filing a 485 with 485J, after 180 days, you are eligible to use the AC21 portability. Even currently you are working for one employer and the other employer supporting you to file 485. After 180 days, you can continue the green card with the current employer's offer. So the joining, going back, and also that is all secondary. You can deal with that.
Okay. The next question is on the perm was filed at Redwood Shores, California in EB2, and the priority date is June 2012. My question is, in order to do a downgrade from EB2 to EB3, do I need to move back to California? If not, what options?
So
I have to initiate.
even though they are saying that first labor file with California, we don't know proper language what they mentioned there. So most of the firm we say that unanticipated US location. So in this kind of cases, without seeing the ETA, we cannot advise anything. So if let's say if it's a California only it listed, they can still employer offering the job reconfirming in 485J, they can file I-485 now. After 180 days, still they have an option to do AC-21 portability. AC-21 portability not restricted to that geographical area.
Okay. The next question is they're asking, can we share a sample affidavit for birth certificate? There's a lot, plenty online, but if you want to get, I think so, you might have to start at least the consultation process, but I'll let you answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple of them online, but you want the format and other things from.
Yeah, maybe you can post our simple format what we have that also in our questionnaire we have, so you can post that too further.
Okay. H4 change of status filed for my dependent just got receipt notice and don't have an approved I-94. What to provide for I-94 in 485?
Yeah, so you can provide the same I-94 whatever you had previously, and the expiry date also you can put the expiry date and provide receipt notice. Maybe you can put small note in the as an addendum stating that your petition is under renewal and this is the receipt number kind of.
Okay. The next question is W2s. How many years of W2 do we need to provide? Can we just provide the last 2 years of transcripts from the IRS website?
Yeah, at the time of filing, they can provide last 2 years, 3 years, whatever. But in case any interview, that officer might ask all the W2s, all tax returns and all during that time.
Okay. The next thing is, does recently got the birth certificate registered? Do we need additional supporting documents?
If it's recently registered, you have to support with secondary evidences like affidavits.
Yeah. All right. So that pretty much covers what questions we have received under the category of 485.
Okay. So yeah, go get that. So maybe we can take another 3-4 questions, then we can wrap up today.
Okay. So
we are on 45 minutes now.
Okay. So I'm not sure how many we can take, but few of them have raised their hand.
Okay.
So I'll start off with them.
Yeah.
So Hari, you completed all the ones that are submitted at the help page, right?
Yes. Under this category, 485.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Praveen, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, I want to know whether I can use EAD because I'm filing right now under the downgrade. Like if my I-140 downgrade is approved, can I start using the EAD? Like, is there any chance in future the 485 get denied even though the 140 is approved? So, I mean, do you suggest to use EAD or to stay on H1?
So I have a question. What do you mean by using EAD? So how you want to use that? Are you going to use that EAD to work for the same employer, or you are going to use it for some other second job and continuing H1B, or entirely you want to switch to some other employer and entirely use the EAD?
Like maybe with another employer or the same employer. Right now, I'm planning to use with the same employer, but like I mean,
I'm employer. If you have H1B status, I'm mentioning continue on H1B status, because that is going to help you in case something was to happen in your EB3 downgrade or whatever. 485 denied, you can come back to
H1. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like,
You can
what
stay
would be
on
the
the
reason?
EAD.
Like, after 140 is approved, do we still have a chance to get 485 get rejected?
After I-140 approved, 485 denial, it's very rare unless you are not maintaining status in one point of time, or your medical exam shows something wrong. Only those
Okay.
reasons it can be denied.
Okay.
So, but one thing, if you are downgrading I-140 approved, moving, let's say after 1.5 years, 2 years, EB2 moving pretty fast. So what you are going to do at the time? You want to come
Um,
back to this employer again, request them, can you do kind of, or how you are going to prepare for it?
yeah, I'm not planning for that right now, but I'm asking in general, like, is it better to use EAD or stick
Okay.
to the,
So
because
now
right now, I mean,
you are using an EAD. Using EAD not going to invalidate your interfiling by using another I-140 approval, say either EB2 approval or some other approval, even that new employer filing another one I-140 for some reason, perm and I-140, you can still interfile. I'm not sure again from where this coming up, using EAD going to invalidate you to switch back to the categories. You can always do it.
okay. So do I need to file complete 485 again, or
No,
just
you don't need
sending
to
the
file
letter to
complete
USCIS?
485. You can interfile this 485.
Okay, so just by
Because
sending a letter.
let's say you are using EB3,
Okay.
filed 485, and the EAD you got it, and after 6 months you started using the EAD and working
Okay.
for third party employers, the employer C or whatever.
Okay.
So now let's say again you want to go back to EB2.
Okay.
So if the same current employer who were supporting to you, if he has an EB2 approval and he has ability to pay to support you and all, still you can use that EB2 approval to interfile.
Okay. Okay. Got you.
And also, let's say that new employer, so you got promoted to some other category or whatever, then it's not a same or similar job to continue your I-485. So in such situation, if they are filing a perm application and I-140, if they are getting it in EB2 or whatever for their own position, like they promoted you as a CEO or whatever, they can do a perm application, they can do an I-140. That time also you can interfile. That time also you are going to first of all porting the priority date old one. So with that approval, you can again interfile. So using EAD or parole or whatever, it's not going to stop you interfiling one approval to pending 485. Can you hear me?
Sorry,
Hello?
Uma Mahesh, can you? Yes, we can hear you. We heard. Going to the next one. Uma Mahesh, can you unmute yourself? And
Hello.
please keep your questions. This session is going to be a shorter session, so
Hello. Like
please keep your
like
questions.
my question. My question is like, if we get a RFE for able to pay, and then how we will prove that in what are the different ways, to prove later, from the employer. That is what.
The question I didn't get it. Can you repeat it?
If
No, they
we
are
get
saying let me. So they are saying if they get a question on ability to pay, what kind of documentation are accepted from the employer?
So first of all, ability to pay, if there is a question, they can two-way USCIS can ask, and simply they can say that provide evidence that you have ability to pay for this employee, to submit tax returns. So even though they put in one line, I would suggest to give detailed ability to pay analysis based on your petition and their other petitions and how much they paid to other employees. Even we have to provide if they have 40 I-140s approved, pending, not processed for green card yet. All these cases they have to list. In fact, they have to put it in Excel sheet and their priority date, case numbers, and from the priority date for every case they have to show the ability to pay, how much they paid, what is the difference. If there is a difference, whether they had money in tax return. And the next case, likewise, everything. So let's say when they are doing a first case, there's a difference, and they are using funds from the tax returns. So you have to, let's say in the tax return they have 200,000, deficit is 20,000. Once you use that 20,000 for deficit, it is reducing to 180. Then you have to look for second case, third case, kind of. In the particular year, let's say you have deficit is 250K and your income is 200K only, then they don't have ability to pay to support all the petitions. So that means they can deny your petition. So even though they paid 200K for you, whereas the prevailing wage is 100, but they don't have ability to pay for other cases, they can deny your case too. So the documents for ability to pay is not limited to tax returns. Even we have to provide pay statements, W-2 for each case they filed.
All right. Next, Krishna, can you ask a question?
Hi, hi, sir. My question is like I have approved Y140 and I'm trying to look at the alien number. I could not see anywhere in my approval notice. Is it?
Yeah, if it is not there in approval notice, just leave it blank. You no need to put that.
Oh, okay. And one more question, sir. I'm hearing for EAD renewal, some of my friends who have renewed the EAD, they were on the EAD status for a couple of years. They said they never had to pay the renewal fee, but some of them I'm hearing that we need to pay the renewal fee for the EAD. So it depends on the case by case, or because some of them are
No,
in.
actually, the earlier days we used to pay very less for the 485s. So later at one point of time, USCS increased to 1140, that current fee, the 1,225, whatever we are paying, 995, then they increased to 1140, whatever. So when they are increasing, what they mentioned that since you are paying an increased fee for all interim renewals, they no need to pay for EAD and parole. So they have to look at their 485 receipt notice, what amount they mentioned. It is if it's an old amount, if they paid before the fee revision, they have to pay for EAD. If they paid the new amount, they no need to pay for it.
Oh, okay. So in our case, it will be the new amount. So in
your case, we are paying 1140, right? Based on that, based on the new fee, you no need to pay for I-131 and 765. But according to the new fee rule, which they supposed to be implemented anytime, which was released on October 2nd, whether you paid 1140 or old one, still they are going to implement a fee for 131 and 765. The down the line, maybe after a month or two, once they implement the new fee, you must pay for 131 irrespective of whatever the fees you paid.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Ramesh, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, this is Bharati, Ramesh's wife. So thanks for all the answers. My question is, in I-944, when I'm filing it for my son, he's 14 years old. I don't have any credit report for him. Is there anything that we have to provide saying that there is no credit report because there is no SSN for him?
You can put one simple letter stating that it is not available because of the age. And also, some sites, if you put his name, whatever the age, they are throwing a pop-up stating that should be 18 years to provide. You can take a screenshot of it. Some agencies, when you are calling them, they are willing to give some statement that it is not available. So maybe that you can go to online and fill with his name and date of birth. It's going to throw a pop-up and take a printout. That is good enough along with your statement.
Okay. Thank you. One other question. I'm a beneficiary or a derivative applicant. I don't have an I-140 approved. Does this mean that I have to go for an education evaluation, or is just if I provide education?
Evaluation, just to give the degree certificate transcripts, that's good enough. You no need to go for evaluation to prove that you have an equivalent bachelor degree.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Andy, can you ask your question?
Hi. My question is there any other document that we can provide in lieu of a certified marriage certificate? Like I have a church-issued marriage certificate, but it's not registered. So
Yeah,
is there
this time you can put that church-issued marriage certificate and affidavits. This is all secondary evidence. So you will get a request for evidence for a non-availability of marriage certificate later.
okay? What would be the so I have to eventually get it registered, or what?
Yeah, you have to get it registered, or you have to take your marriage certificate is not available. That kind of certificate. That's what non-availability of marriage certificate registration.
And that we can give it ourselves, like just,
Yes. Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Vijay, can you unmute yourself?
Hello. Hi, this is Vijay here. Yeah, my question is a general one. Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, yes.
I don't have birth certificate. My birth certificate given in the certificate is different, but my actual birth date is 10 months before. In all my certificate, the birth certificate, the birth date is different. So in my case, what I have to do?
So your birth certificate, you said not available or is different?
Yeah, I don't have the birth certificate also.
Okay, and which one is different?
No,
Passport and
my actual birth date is different. Yeah. But
yeah.
for the passport, all my certificate, I have the photo in the certificate. It is there.
Okay, you call me separately. I'll tell you how to handle it. This you have to. That's what you can schedule a call. I can talk to. This is all the personal issues, so we have to talk. We can talk in phone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sumesh, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So for my wife, the city of birth is different in her birth certificate and in her passport. So what should we do?
Yeah, that's what we addressed this earlier. So you have to correct it in the passport.
Okay. You have to correct it in the passport. So for now, for filing the 485, we can go by the city of birth in the.
You can do that, but they are going to issue request for evidence. So this case also, you set up separate call with me, so I can't discuss this in open forum.
Okay. And another question is like for myself, I have 3 years bachelor's degree and then 3 years PGDCA from India. And my company filed the under EB2 masters plus 3 years, equivalent to bachelor's plus 5. So will downgrade cause
PGDCA from where?
PGDCA from IMT Ghaziabad in India.
Okay, so is that they mentioned that it is approved by All India Council for Technical Education something?
Yeah, AICT. So yeah, so
in your case maybe there's a problem. So we have to they filed as a master's degree requirement for you.
No, they said they said masters plus 3 years equivalent to bachelor's plus 5 also, that is mentioned. So this was in my first firm in 2011, it was said masters plus 1 year. Then in my current company in 2015, I ported again in EB2, they filed under masters plus 3 equivalent to bachelor's plus 5. And I have the experience letter with 3 years and all those I provided during the I-140 last time. So I wasn't sure.
No, this one experience letter is different. When it comes to immigrant petition, first they are going to see what degree you have.
Okay.
So whether you have equivalent degrees, let's say in your PERM application, they mentioned that they need a bachelor degree with 5 years experience. First, they are going to look at whether you have independently bachelor degree equivalent education or not.
Okay.
So then only experience and all will come to. That is for experience requirement, not for education requirement.
Right.
So here, if you have 3-year degree, 3-year diploma, it's a little hard in the to say that it is equivalent to bachelor degree only. So Also, there are some languages they use in PERM. I don't know whether what kind of language they used it. And if any education after 3-year bachelor degree, whether it's a diploma or B.Ed, M.Ed, whatever that MSc, those things and all, their minimum requirement to enter into that course is 3-year bachelor degree. So this all the writings has to be a little clear in the evaluation, stating that your diploma needs at least a 3-year bachelor degree, so that independently that is equivalent to bachelor degree kind of. I don't know what such kind of evaluation you obtained or not. So in your case, better to read the evaluation and see your degree and see your diploma. What is the minimum requirement to enter into that diploma? So minimum education requirement, like to get into BE, you need a high school certificate, I mean +2. Likewise, to go to B.Ed, you need a 3-year bachelor degree. So likewise, we have to see that for this diploma, what is the requirement?
Okay. Yeah, the requirement, like I have the 3 years bachelor in computer science. Then
you have it. So your having degree is different, but what is that prospectus they put, right? You can apply only if you have a BSc to apply to MSc kind of. So that language should be there.
Okay.
Yeah. So then they are going to see that whether that is accredited diploma or not. So not only that, the evaluator, when they are writing it, they have to write very clearly single source evaluation. It's not like they can say that your 3-year bachelor degree and that one 3-year diploma both combined equivalent to bachelor degree kind of. So that won't work. So there's a lot of technical things there.
Right. So in 2016, like I'm not sure how they did the evaluation and all that. So it got approved under EB2. So you are saying now
Sometimes
again,
even if they overlook, they can approve it, but when they are revisiting, there's there may be some problem.
and my PERM date is like May 23rd, 2011 in EB2. So do you think it's better with all these things, better to wait than downgrade?
Yeah, I would say you can wait.
All right,
or otherwise, we have to completely, we have to see the ETA, that form, and also your education. Then we can decide whether how it will work for you, whether it is manageable or not. That's what we have to check.
Okay. Take the next question, Srinivas. Srinivas, are you able to? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the call. My question is, for the birth certificate for my wife, it doesn't have the name, but it's registered within 30 days. So should that be submitted or just only the
you can submit that along with the affidavits. So if you're not submitting affidavit, you can still manage it in the future. You can submit that.
Okay, so affidavit can be a written letter that notarized, or it has to, I mean, the father mother has to show.
Right, yeah.
Okay, okay, sure. Thank you.
Hari, almost we are done with an hour. Shall we move on for because I have a lot of other things to take care of now.
Sure. Run the top of the hour. So
yeah, thank you, Rajguru. So Rajguru, you are signing off?
Yes, I have to sign off because this crunch time.
Sure.
So we already spent 30 minutes to 1 hour now.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you so much. And we'll so just general information to everybody. We'll be posting all the future webinars on various topics, not just on the EB2, EB3, but Rajguru is kind enough to provide on much more wide range of topics, and we'll keep on posting every week in the WhatsApp group. So you should be in the WhatsApp group or Telegram group, and if you're not there, you go to the website letustalkit.com, and then from there directly you can join the WhatsApp group as well. So thanks, Rajguru.
Okay, thank you. See you again.
Now we will continue with Hari, where he's going to, explain about the other ones and any other. Maybe if you want to continue the interactive session, you can continue as well. But attorney advice is final, and Hari is not attorney. It is just like providing some information at his best. And you can always take one-on-one appointment with Rajguru. Kindly let us know if you want to